All right, so get ready, because tonight we're diving deep into Toyland. But not the happy kind you might be thinking of. No, this is about those creepy toys, the ones that make you think twice about the dolls staring at you from the shelf.
Yeah, the time that might just come to life after you turn off the lights.
Exactly, those scary toy stories, those urban legends. We're talking demonic Smurfs in Latin America.
Furbies causing a national security scare.
Yeah, we'll explore why these stories kind of grab us, and maybe, just maybe, what they say about what scares us.
I think the really interesting thing is that whether these stories are real or just made up, there's something about them that connects with everyone. Toys coming to life, sometimes good, sometimes bad. It's a story told everywhere, like across different cultures.
It's true, almost like childhood innocence meeting, I don't know, something dark and hidden. And speaking of things that might be a little more than they seem, what about those Smurfs? They seem so innocent.
Yeah, cute and cuddly, but in Latin America they have a different reputation.
I've heard a little about this. What kind of stories are we talking about?
Well, people tell stories about the pitufos, as they call them, about them coming to life at night, doing little mischievous things, maybe whispering secrets. Some stories even say they do dark magic.
Okay, that's not the Smurfs I remember from Saturday morning cartoons. Do you have any idea why people would see them this way?
Well, folklore often reflects, the worries people have at a certain time or place. Maybe these stories are about the fear of hidden danger or even the worry that innocent things can be corrupted, like taking that fear and putting it onto something familiar.
Something safe, like a kid's toy.
Exactly.
It is a bit unsettling, to think that something you thought was one way turns out to be totally different. Kind of like those cute little Smurfs.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that seem innocent but might not be, let's move on to the 90s. Remember those Furbies?
Oh, yeah. They were everywhere, those talking fluffy toys.
But they caused more than just a craze. They actually managed to freak out the NSA, the National Security Agency.
Can you believe that?
What on earth did those fluffy owls do to attract that kind of attention?
Well, remember, back then, smartphones weren't really a thing yet. We didn't have Alexa or anything like that. So a toy that could record and repeat phrases was like mind-blowing technology.
So the NSA thought they were spying on us, like little furry secret agents.
That's exactly what happened. They actually banned them from their offices. They were worried that Furbies would record confidential information. Imagine a top-secret government agency scared of a children's toy.
That's wild. So what did people think about this whole thing?
It caused a huge uproar. People started returning their Furbies. Some even destroyed them. They were afraid they were bringing spying devices into their homes. It really shows how uneasy people were about technology and privacy back then, especially because these ideas were so new.
Right, like what happens when the line between fun toys and serious tech gets blurry?
Yeah.
You make a fun interactive toy, and it causes a national security panic. Talk about mixed messages. But before we get back to technology, let's talk about something that's been freaking people out for centuries. Haunted dolls.
Oh yeah, there's just something about them that's unsettling, isn't there? Their faces, the blank stares, the connection to childhood.
Yeah.
Like they're empty vessels for our deepest fears.
And there are two dolls that really capture our imagination, Annabelle and Robert. One is this perfectly made porcelain doll, and the other is handmade. And not as scary looking, but both have these super creepy stories attached to them.
Yeah, Annabelle, with her pristine look, is supposedly possessed by a demon and locked away in a museum. And Robert, well, he doesn't look as scary, but he's got a stronghold in local legend and lives in a museum in Key West.
So different looks, but the same sense of mystery and fear around them. Why are dolls such powerful symbols for these stories?
I think it's because they take something meant to be innocent, something that's supposed to be comforting, and twist it into something scary. And it's not just about the dolls themselves, but what they represent. Childhood, vulnerability, the things we trust. It takes all of that and makes it feel unsafe and unknown.
Okay, before we dive into the stories of Annabelle and Robert, let's go back in time a bit. Back to the early days of recorded sound. There's this toy that wasn't supposed to be creepy, but the technology of the time made it that way.
You're talking about those Edison talking dolls. A great idea in theory, but in reality, a little off-putting.
We're talking about the late 1800s here. Cutting-edge tech. Edison wanted to bring dolls to life with sound, using those wax cylinder recordings. But instead of sweet songs or cute phrases, you got these distorted, creepy sounds.
Can you imagine you're a kid expecting to hear a soothing voice? And instead you get this jumbled mess of sounds from your doll. No wonder those dolls didn't sell well.
It's like nightmare fuel. And this was back when people were just getting used to the idea of recorded sound. So hearing a voice coming from a doll, especially in a quiet room, must have been really creepy.
It's true. Like those old horror movies where they use distorted voices to make things scarier. And to make it worse, lots of these dolls were made of bisque porcelain, which cracks and chips over time.
So you have a doll with a creepy voice, covered in cracks, staring at you. Yikes. No wonder these dolls were a flop.
A classic example of good intentions going wrong. Edison was ahead of his time, but the technology just wasn't there yet. And he accidentally created a toy that tapped into our fear of the uncanny.
And that unease we feel around things that are almost human but not quite comes up a lot in these creepy toy stories.
Like, our brains just know to be wary of things that look too artificial, too lifelike, but without that genuine human spark.
Which brings us back to the question we started with. Why do we love these stories about toys gone bad? Why are we fascinated by possessed dolls, demon smurfs, and toy spies?
It could be because they reflect our anxieties. Toys are supposed to be about innocence and happiness, so when they become twisted, it makes us question our own safety.
Like a reminder that even in the familiar, safe parts of our lives, something dark could be lurking beneath the surface.
And maybe that's why we keep telling these stories. Even with all our technology, there are still things we don't understand, things that scare us.
So the next time you find an old toy, think about the stories it might tell. Some could be heartwarming, but others, well, maybe you should keep a nightlight on.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us on this dive into the strange world of creepy toy legends.
Welcome back to our deep dive into those creepy toys and the stories behind them. Better keep that nightlight on because we're gonna meet two of the most famous haunted dolls ever, Robert and Annabelle.
You know, it's funny, when you say haunted doll, I immediately think of Annabelle, probably because of all those movies. But this Robert doll, he sounds, well, like a whole different kind of creepy.
Oh, he's definitely unique looking. Robert's this handmade doll dressed like a sailor, and he might not seem that scary at first glance, but he's been the star of some seriously creepy stories for over 100 years.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What's his story?
It all starts in Key West, Florida, back in the early 1900s. There was this young boy, Robert Eugene Otto. He got this doll as a gift from, well, the story goes, a Bahamian servant who practiced voodoo.
So we have voodoo, a creepy doll, and a boy probably blamed for everything. Sounds like a recipe for a good ghost story.
Right, and you know what? Young Robert, he became super attached to this doll. He even named it after himself, called it Robert the Doll, and people said they heard the doll talking back to him. Some even said they saw the doll's face change, like its eyes flashed with evil.
So it went from innocent play to something a lot darker, like the toys are talking back. Kind of scary.
Things got really strange. Objects would disappear, accidents would happen. People even said Robert the doll threatened anyone who dared to make fun of him.
It's weird how these haunted doll stories always seem to start small, like things moving around or disappearing, and then bam, they take a creepy turn.
It's like that slow buildup of unease, like something is off, and that's what makes those stories so good, so creepy. They play with our fear of the unknown, of things we can't control.
So what happened to Robert? Is he still causing trouble in Key West?
Well, actually, he's living in the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West now. Visitors leave him gifts, they ask his permission before taking pictures. Some even say they can feel his presence.
So he's behind glass, but still a legend.
Definitely. Robert the doll really captures that fascination we have with things that blur the line between normal and supernatural. And speaking of blurring lines, let's talk about Annabelle. Now, her story goes deep into the world of demonic possession.
Okay, time for the queen of creepy dolls. She's everywhere these days, thanks to those movies. What's the real story?
Well, it all started in the 1970s. There was this nursing student, Donna. She got this Raggedy Ann doll as a present. At first, it seemed harmless enough, but things quickly took a dark turn.
Isn't it strange how often these stories start with an innocent gift? Like something meant to be sweet and nice becoming something terrifying.
It's that contrast that makes it so creepy, right? Like a violation of something safe and comforting. So with Annabelle, she started moving on her own, changing positions, even showing up in different rooms. Donna and her roommate would find these strange notes written in a child's handwriting.
Creepy notes, what did they say?
Things like, "Help us" and "Help Lou." Lou was Donna's roommate's boyfriend. And then Lou started having nightmares. He even said the doll attacked him.
Wait, like a Raggedy Ann doll attacked him. Now that's scary.
Yeah, he said it choked him while he was sleeping. So Donna and her roommate, they called in a medium. The medium said the doll was possessed by the spirit of a little girl named Annabelle Higgins.
So they thought it was like a sad ghost story at first.
They felt bad for the spirit, so they tried to be nice to Annabelle, but it just got worse. Lou got hurt even more. So they finally called in a priest and those famous paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren.
The Warrens, like from the Amityville Horror. Wow, didn't they make a movie about that too?
That's them. They said Annabelle wasn't possessed by a little girl, but by a demon pretending to be a child so they would trust it. They took the doll to their museum in Connecticut, and that's where she stays, locked away in a special case.
I've heard those stories about people who mess with Annabelle or her case, and bad things happen to them.
There are lots of stories and legends about her, whether they're true or just people scared. Annabelle's story still scares and fascinates people all over the world.
It's amazing how these haunted doll stories really get to us. They play on our fears of the unknown. And it's not just dolls, right? It happens with other toys too, especially with new technology.
You're right, like those Edison talking dolls we talked about. They were meant to be creepy, but the technology just wasn't good enough, and they ended up sounding like something out of a nightmare.
Welcome back to our final look into these creepy toy legends. From Smurfs to haunted dolls and the NSA freaking out about Furbies, it's been quite a journey.
It really makes you think about why these stories are so powerful, how they show what we're most afraid of.
And speaking of things that make us uneasy, we're talking about those Edison talking dolls. The ones that were supposed to be cute, but ended up sounding, well, terrifying.
It's amazing how something meant to be so delightful could become so creepy just because the technology wasn't ready.
Let's go back in time to the late 1800s. Thomas Edison, this genius inventor, he just created the phonograph. Cutting-edge stuff, right? And naturally, he wanted to bring this tech into people's homes.
And toys are the perfect way to do that, right? He imagined dolls that could actually talk, sing, and tell stories. It was like a whole new way for kids to play.
So the Edison talking doll was born. They looked pretty normal, often made from that bisque porcelain. But the big difference was they had a tiny phonograph built right inside them.
The idea was for kids to hear their dolls recite nursery rhymes, sing songs, or even speak a few phrases. Totally revolutionary back then.
But there was a problem. The technology just wasn't quite there yet. The recordings they used often ended up muffled, distorted. Kind of creepy, honestly.
Imagine you're a kid expecting a sweet little lullaby, and instead you hear this garbled mess coming from your doll. That wouldn't exactly help you sleep.
More like the opposite. And remember, this was back when people weren't used to recorded sound. So a voice coming from a doll, especially in the quiet of night, must have been really unnerving.
For sure. Like in those old horror movies that use distorted voices to make things scarier. Plus, a lot of those dolls were made of bisque porcelain, which cracks and chips as it gets old.
So now you have this doll with a creepy voice coming out of it, and it's covered in cracks. No wonder nobody wanted to buy them.
Yeah, a good idea gone wrong. Edison was ahead of his time, but the tech just wasn't good enough. And in the process, he accidentally created a toy that really played on our fear of things that seem almost human, but not quite right.
And that's what we call the uncanny valley, right? That feeling that things that are too lifelike but not quite human give us. And it's something that comes up again and again in these creepy toy stories.
It's like our instincts tell us to be cautious around things that look too artificial. They have that lifelike quality, but without that genuine human touch.
So we've talked about a lot of creepy toy legends, but the question remains, why are we so drawn to them? What is it about dolls coming to life, demonic Smurfs, and toy spies that keeps us coming back for more?
Maybe it's because these stories tap into our anxieties about the world around us. Toys are supposed to be symbols of innocence and joy, so when they turn dark, it shakes our sense of safety and security.
It's like a reminder that even in the things we think of as safe and familiar, something unsettling could be hiding just beneath the surface.
And maybe that's why we keep telling these stories. They remind us that even with all our technology and advancements, there are still mysteries out there, things we can't fully explain, and that can be a little scary, but also really exciting.
So next time you find an old toy, think about the stories it might hold. Some might be heartwarming, but others, well, let's just say you might want to keep a nightlight on, just in case.
I think I will.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of creepy toy legends. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the toys bite.